Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to my channel 5149, where I talk business, politics, society. And this week's video is a special one. I am teaming up with fellow independent media YouTuber Spencer Synder to cover wage theft, which happens to be the biggest and most common type of theft in the United States, easily eclipsing other categories of theft, such as larceny, burglary, auto theft, and even robbery. I did a breakdown of how and why wage theft is so prevalent in our country. Definitely head on over to his channel when you get a chance to check that video out. But another big question is, why don't we hear anything about it in the corporate media? Well, this is where Spencer's expertise and insight into media coverage comes in. He's done some tremendous reporting on media coverage and media bias, and even did a video analyzing an entire day's worth of coverage on CNN. And trust me, that video will knock your socks off. So today he's gonna help us understand why corporate media has more or less entirely ignored the biggest theft of all time. Enjoy.
Thanks for having me on, James. My name is Spencer, and over on my channel, I tend to focus on media. And today I wanna talk about how media covers wage theft. Corporations steal $15 billion a year from workers, and that number could be as high as $60 billion even. Of course, indie media covers this. James did an excellent breakdown of this issue over on my channel. Go check that out. But this is something you almost never hear about from mainstream and corporate outlets. And I can confirm this because I went through an entire year of televised news media, all of 2021, looking for any mention or discussion of wage theft I could find, because for sure, 2021 saw its share of wage theft.
DoorDash will pay more than $5 million to settle a labor dispute with some of its drivers in San Francisco. It's the largest settlement ever reached by the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement.
So DoorDash's violations happened between 2016 and 2020, and most of the workers in the settlement received between $500 and $1,000. And of course, low-wage workers and workers in the service industry are frequent targets.
Hundreds of Burger King workers in San Francisco are still waiting for money owed to them over wage theft. According to the Chronicle, 5 locations were hit with a nearly $2 million citation last year. It accuses the Golden Gate Restaurant Group of not paying minimum wage.
But it's not just giant national chains. The little guy also likes to abuse the little guy.
22 servers, bussers, cooks, and other kitchen staff at Z&Y Restaurant sued for stolen wages, tips, penalties, and interest.
Now, you may have noticed that all of those clips were from local broadcasts. I was reviewing all national news as well as California stations owned and operated by the major networks, and the local California shows were among the only outlets actually presenting stories about wage theft. This show even featured an entire discussion about wage theft with an assistant district attorney who's involved with a worker exploitation task force. This is the kind of thing that should be on PBS before a national audience if PBS weren't impoverished by this country, because quality discussion time with guests is a big way news communicates to an audience the importance of a topic. The only other instances I found of such a discussion explicitly about wage theft, though, was on RT. Because for some reason, it seems to be that the bigger the audience, the less likely a talk about wage theft was to happen, because the national broadcasts come in last place. Lester Holt featured a special report on the theft of wages from construction workers in Iowa. These workers were likely undocumented. It went out of its way not to specify, but the piece contained a discussion about wage theft more broadly. Okay, credit where it's due, but that was the single national televised story on specifically wage theft for all of 2021. The 3 major cable networks, MSNBC, Fox, and CNN, that collectively broadcast 72 hours a day, had no time, for example, to cover Walgreens having to pay $4.5 million to settle a class action lawsuit alleging stolen wages. Nor did they have very much time to talk about New York City suing Chipotle, alleging the company owes workers $151 million. That's a shocking headline. Now, Ana Cabrera did have on Chipotle's chief restaurant officer to press him a little bit on that, and that's fine, but that's all I could find for cable news, and the business channels included, Bloomberg, CNBC, Fox Business. And the fact that questions about the lawsuit went to a Chipotle executive and not people behind the lawsuit is its own crazy fundamental problem. But in total, stories about wage theft for national network news, there was only the single segment on NBC Nightly News. RT had a couple clips, including on Chipotle and Walgreens, and the California stations actually did the best. I counted 5 instances for the year. 4 of those were just headline reads, but still, if that's representative of the rest of the country's local reporting, then that's something. I mean, it probably still doesn't add up to the minutes devoted to the odd bear wandering through the suburbs, but so I think the question is, why does this happen? Why does this have to be this way? And I have a couple hypotheses. The reasons are probably less mustache-twirling evil and more just some combination of systemic pressures and cowardice and probably laziness too. First, take the expression, if it bleeds, it leads. This represents an enormous failure of imagination. The idea that TV is a visual medium. Thus, events that can be captured on video are more valuable than events that need to be explained. This is plainly false. Footage of someone stealing from a Walgreens is not intrinsically more interesting than Walgreens stealing from workers. The question comes down to storytelling. Plus, Fox, CNN, and MSNBC spend hours a day showing panels of semi-lucid pundits enthusiastically discussing tweets. Hardly a visual spectacle. Yet they still manage to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars a year in advertising. And then there is advertising. Of course, a network is less likely to feature a negative story about an advertiser or stories that might just offend advertisers. For example, does McDonald's want their ads running in between stories about Burger King and Chipotle bilking their employees? I would guess no. Certainly, producers and executives of networks are sensitive to this. And then there is the fact that, especially on cable news, these stories can't really be told in terms of left or right. Local news and national evening news have not declared allegiances to political parties, certainly not in the way MSNBC or Fox have. So a story that doesn't boil down to either Republicans or Democrats being the villain, that's another point against. So you take all these things together, and I imagine for people at networks pitching stories, they see a headline about Walgreens settling a wage theft suit, and they say, you know, that sounds like an important story, but it might not really be for us. And to even be in the room with a top anchor pitching stories probably says a lot about where your values lie and what you think is important. But whatever the exact reasons are, whether it's people actually killing stories or self-censorship, which is one of the most potent forms of censorship in journalism, or if it's just that people at these outlets are way more interested in whatever outrageous thing some Republican governor said than they are about the material conditions of the people living in said governor's state. Possibly some combination of all of it, but that is why it's so important for independent media to make a big deal about it. James made a great video breaking down more of the why of all this, and you can find that over on my channel. And subscribe to James here if you haven't, because he does great work, and that's why I've been watching his stuff from pretty close to the beginning. So thanks for having me on, James. I will see you in the next one.